Hello and welcome to Billy Ho Sports. We are just over a couple of weeks away from Kentucky Derby 150. I can't believe it's already getting this close. All the prep races are complete. A couple of horses fall out, brings in a couple, but we still got that quality field of 20. So today, what I want to focus on are some key factors that may affect the outcome of the race that might help us predict a winner. So put this video in my Kentucky Derby Trail playlist as always. So check that out. It's got countless videos going all the way back to last fall to the Breeders' Cup Juvenile 2-year-olds. So plenty of things to feed your lizard brain, but hopefully not too much to lead you down a rabbit hole. You don't want to start overthinking things and then you start trying to get too deep and then you get lost in what you're doing. So as always, I ask, please subscribe to the channel. Very much appreciate that. Smash that like button for me. In the comment section, tell me what the factors are that you look at. We're going to cover things like dosage. We're going to just touch on the weather briefly, pace, post positions, jockey trainers, all that kind of good stuff. So what do you dig into when you try to predict the Kentucky Derby? So let's get to it. All right, the first factor I want to get out of the way is the weather. It has been wet all year long this year. This is one of the wettest years I can remember on the Derby Trail. So most of these races have multiple races and experience on wet, sloppy, muddy tracks. Uh, Definitely far too early to predict the weather. I looked out as far as I possibly could, and there are like storms that week, like Thursday. There might be some isolated storms and things of that nature. The temperatures appear to be in the mid 60s or so. So it might be slightly on the cooler side, uh, but not 100% sure yet. So, just for an example, if it were to rain a lot, I might favor a horse like Sierra Leone over Fierceness if the track is a little bit more sloppy. But you have to also keep in mind if it does get just a little bit of rain, Churchill Downs can run faster because the horses can dig in. So those are things to keep in mind on the weather front. So the next one, obviously, everybody looks forward to is the post position draw. That'll happen Derby week. I can't remember if they do it Tuesday or Monday now, but horses can break from any kind of post and win this race. Posts 1 and 2 are kind of the worst, I'd say. And it used to be that the outside posts were dead money, but 2020, I believe we finally got the 20 gate auxiliary, or not the auxiliary anymore, but the full 20 field gate. So everybody's even across the line. I watched the break for all those years, and they're much more streamlined, and the horses can break from outer posts much easier and to get into position. And of course, I looked it up, and I believe 8 out of the last 16 years, post 16 and beyond, have won the race. Like we've had post 16, we've had post 18, we've had post 19, we've had post 20. For some reason, post 17 has never won the Derby. I don't know why that is, but so those inside posts are better. You're better off being one of those closers coming from off the pace. It would require tons of energy. You're breaking out of those early posts and you're trying to race to the lead and trying to beat 18, 19 other horses converging across the track at you. That's got to be taxing on a horse. So that's why I think it's difficult from the inside. But basically what I'll do once the draw comes out, I'll probably put a little video together, just kind of analyzing the old cui bono, like AKA who benefits from what post positions, because you never know if you got a closer next to a speed horse, that's fine because the speed horse can just go right on by. Those two don't affect each other. But when you got two speeds or two closers, then things can get dicey. So post positions will matter. We'll wait for that too. Those are two things that are out in the future. Uh, the next factor I want to talk about is pace. We always want to try to predict the pace of the Kentucky Derby. It's easier than you may think. Will it be a fast pace? Will it be a slow pace? Will it be a moderate pace? No one knows for sure. Sometimes they are running a little fast. Sometimes, it depends. And sometimes the weather plays a factor. But what I do know is the opening quarter is going to be fast. That is basically the race to the first turn. The opening quarter is right up to that first turn. So horses have to get out of the gate fast. They have to gain position by that first turn, or they risk getting cut off or caught wide. So that usually gives us about a 22 to 23-second opening quarter, which is fast. Then it's still going to maintain a pretty swift pace and could be 45, 46 for the half mile. But that's where things start to even out. After the half mile, you'll see it be like 3/4 at 110. And then the next frame will be 136. So you're talking about 25 seconds per quarter mile rather than 22, 23 seconds. And also, I'm going to show you some stuff along the way. This time stat right here, you'll see every year people will show it. I'm not a fan of it. It's like the last 3/8 of a mile plus the last eighth of a mile, the time the horse ran in his final prep race. And the reason why I don't like that, and I'll show you the same numbers for the Derby winners. But the reason why I don't like it, I'll give you an example, is domestic product. Domestic product had the fastest final prep time on the list from his victory at the Tampa Bay Derby. What it doesn't tell you there is that they ran a slow opening quarter of 25, over 25 seconds, 25.11 or something like that, then over 51 seconds, 51 and change for the half mile. It's a lot easier to run those fast closing fractions late in the race when you have the race that slow. You're talking Kentucky Derby is going to be 23 seconds to 46 seconds for the half. So it's not as easy to run those fast fractions down the stretch. Now, compare that to something like the Florida Derby. Fierceness in his race, he was in control probably by the half mile point. And then at the actual start of the last 3/8, he begins extending his lead. He pushes it out 1 length, 2 length, 3 lengths, and so on. Well, he was in hand for the final eighth and closed that out in 12.59 seconds. And he had nobody pushing him, no rivals. He was wide open down the stretch, 8-length lead in the stretch, and then he extended it out from there. So he was just running fast down the stretch. And then conversely, the Bluegrass Stakes, Sierra Leone, who's a closer who has to run them down late, covered that same 1/8 at Keeneland in just over 13 seconds. But he was coming from behind. He was chasing down the leaders. He had a target. So, what I like to look at when past performances, and I've mentioned it in previous videos, and you'll see on the screen, specifically the 1C and 2C, but more importantly, the 1C. That's the first call, and that's usually the opening fractions, like the opening quarter or so, and that one will tell you how fast the opening pace is. And if you look at a couple of the examples of horses that ran the last 2 Kentucky Derbies, you'll see one of them was plus 14, one of them was plus 20. So those are fast. Anything plus 14 and up is a fast pace. And then you'll see a lot of times the negative numbers. And the negative numbers, if you start to get past -5 to -10, those favor front runners because they're slower paces. So what you want to look for is this year's field actually has a lot more off the pace and closer types. So that does make me a little bit more curious, but I still firmly believe that opening quarter is going to be super fast. It might settle down a little faster. I'd be surprised if we had much more than a 46 half mile. So that's pretty much how the pace will play out. And you can look at we'll go over the past performances when they come out as well. And we'll maybe try to do a little predicting on which horses can benefit from what kind of pace, things of that nature. But that's something to be mindful of. Usually the faster horses, like a Fierceness, that can run these fast paces and maintain them, are usually good. A lot of times the closers, uh, they'll say, oh, well, he didn't get enough pace to run at in the end. But sometimes some of these closers need that pace to be a little bit slower so they can keep up and then make that big run down the lane. Now, another factor to consider: jockeys and trainers. I'm big on jockeys and trainers, not the combo specifically, trainer combo, like how successful the duo is, but strictly conduct and not really strictly Kentucky Derby experience either. I'm looking for how the trainer has developed that horse, how he got him there, which races did they run in, which tracks did they come out of, how much rest in between races, that sort of thing. And jockeys I'm a little bit more uh okay with, because most of all these jockeys are veteran jockeys. They've had Derby experience. There's been, there's not one jockey that ever dominates. You'll see one that wins back to back and then maybe 2 and 3 years, things of that nature. And we all know who our favorite jockeys are. But I will say this. I like jockeys that have ridden their horses multiple times. There are some jockeys that have rode more than one of these horses, so it's going to be interesting to see which way they go, because I'm a less likely to favor a horse that gets a new jockey that hasn't maybe ridden the horse before, and then he's going to have to get to know that horse Derby week and this far out. So those are all factors that go into jockeys and trainers. Okay, lastly, let's talk about dosage index. My buddy Billy, shout out Billy, Billy D there. He's asked me numerous times, you ought to talk about dosage. You ought to talk about dosage. I said, well, I don't know that some people still use it. It's it's a basically it's like this: the dosage index, numerical representation of a horse's pedigree, that handicappers use, breeders use to assess a horse's potential for stamina. We use the dosage index when it points to Kentucky Derby because it's 1.25 miles and it's longer than they've run most of their careers. It's based on the ancestry. It tries to predict how much distance they'll get in terms of the importance of the Kentucky Derby, obviously getting that classic distance. I don't put as much stock into it as I used to, but there are some interesting numbers to note. I put up in the background kind of what the dosage index means. So basically, the lower the dosage, the more it leans towards stamina. The higher the dosage, the more it leans towards speed. And I believe 4 is kind of like the median. It's kind of like that scale where you go with acid and base. 7 is a neutral, 4 is a neutral. And then you start getting down to 0, that's stamina. You start moving up. 5 is probably still a little bit neutral, but you start getting up 6, 7, and 8. Then that's when you get into a speed horse, and those are more your sprinter types. But I will tell you a couple of interesting things that I noticed when I looked at the dosage index of these contenders. Encino, trained by Brad Cox, dosage index of 2.33. That slightly leans towards stamina. He is sired by Nyquist, who I believe had an index of like 9, and he showed pure speed, but he obviously bucked that trend. If you go back and look at the 2016 Kentucky Derby, he was able to actually press the leader, who was Gun Runner, who made the turn for home, and he actually outlasted Gun Runner in the stretch. But he was on the lead, but he still had the stamina to run that 1.25 miles. So obviously Encino has enough stamina in his lineage to make that dosage down to a 2.33 when his sire had such a high index himself. So it actually, and you don't want to get confused, because when I first started learning about it, I was confused. You mean the lower the number, that means they're closers. The higher the number are the speed horses, that means they're the early speed. Well, sometimes that can be true, but that doesn't necessarily correlate with racing style. Take a horse like Catching Freedom. He comes from off the pace. He came from dead last, I believe, in the Louisiana Derby to win that one. So his dosage is 5.67, which is leaning towards speed, but he is actually a closer. He's pretty much a pure closer. So but you could clearly see him show his speed when he hits the gas around that final turn and hits the stretch run where he is in a dead sprint with Honor Marie. He actually does a little dance job to avoid contact with Honor Marie and then outraces him to the finish line. Looked very fast in that stretch run. And actually looking at this stuff has made me a little bit more of a fan of Catching Freedom, so to speak. So some horses are natural front runners, others are closers. It depends. They're still young. There's some that are very versatile. They can change styles on the fly if need be. So I hope you got a little bit of an understanding. I'm no expert on dosage myself. It's a tool just like anything else. So use it at your own risk. But where do I land on all this? Like I said, I think I'm a little bit more of a fan of Catching Freedom than I was before, which I was a fan. He's very similar. I mean, he's a closer like Sierra Leone, but he looks like Sierra Leone just looks like he just gobbles up that ground late, like he's just churning like a big old train, like kind of like Forte, which I've compared him to. Catching Freedom looks just a faster down the stretch, in my opinion, at least in those two races. So I think that Catching Freedom could adjust his early position and get him closer to lead. He certainly doesn't want to be 18th or 19th at the half mile marker and try to make up all that ground. That's a lot to do. So basically, if you asked me to reshuffle my top 10 list, which I have a video out for that, by the way, this is what it would be. I inched up Catching Freedom closer to the top 3. So the top 3: Fierceness, Sierra Leone, Catching Freedom. I switched Just Steel and Honor Marie swap, I guess because I like the way Honor Marie ran so good down the stretch in that Louisiana Derby. But just those two are kind of like 5 and 5A. If you ask me, they're right close to the same level of skill. I think Endlessly is not likely to run in the Derby. I think they've already said they're pointing them to the turf still. So I put that gave me the opportunity to put back in Dornick. So I slotted him in at number 8. I think that race in the Bluegrass was a little bit telling. I did notice that he wanted to run, but he kind of got held up. So he might have been just a little bit frustrated in that race, and that might have caused his poor output. But he also just might not be the right suit to win this race, too. And I'm also warming up more to Encino, so I moved him in and bumped out Resilience. Encino, I really like we started looking at Dosage. I started looking at Lineage. Encino's Dam Glittering Jewel, I believe is the name. I didn't really see a whole lot in the Dam, but she was sired by Bernardini, who back in 2006 missed the Kentucky Derby, but absolutely dominated the 3-year-old season. Won the Preakness, won the Travers, came in second in the Breeders' Cup, won a whole bunch of stakes races that summer, and was upset second in the Breeders' Cup Classic. So I thought that's really some solid lineage for Encino. And that's one of those that's moving from the all-weather, kind of like your Two Fills, your Rich Strike did. So I'm going to keep an eye on Encino. I want to see who rides that horse. Hopefully he gets one of those hopefully he gets the same jockey he had before. And I can't recall off the top of my head who that was. But anyway, that's going to do it. Key factors to predicting the Kentucky Derby. We'll keep an ear to the ground on the buzz at Churchill Downs to see any news that are coming out. And if there is anything really breaking, I'll be right back on here for you. So they're getting to Churchill Downs. I believe they're going to be several hitting the track today. Be on the lookout for more videos coming out. Maybe we'll do one how the horses are looking in their workouts. I'm going to try to get out there in the morning, maybe to see them live myself. So until then, thank you for watching, and we'll see you soon.